Yelena Dmitrievna pulled her reindeer fur coat tighter as she stepped into the pre-dawn darkness of Yakutia. At 72, her weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking the fire that had burned through another brutal night. The thermometer outside her small wooden cabin read -71 degrees Celsius, a temperature that could kill an unprepared soul within minutes. The old woman's breath formed crystalline clouds that instantly froze and fell like tiny diamonds to the snow-covered ground. Her husband, Mikhail, had been gone 3 winters now, leaving her alone in this remote corner of Siberia where the nearest neighbor lived 40 kilometers away. Most people her age would have moved to the village, but Yelena possessed the stubborn resilience of her Yakut ancestors. She shuffled toward the small barn, where her 2 remaining reindeer, Bayan and Kira, waited for their morning feed. The animals' thick winter coats were covered in frost, their dark eyes reflecting the orange glow from her oil lamp. These creatures were more than livestock. They were her lifeline to survival in the world's coldest inhabited region. As she scattered hay and checked their water, which she kept from freezing with heated stones, Yelena noticed something troubling. Fresh tracks in the snow led away from the barn, large, deep paw prints that belonged to no domestic animal. A wolf had been here during the night, circling her property like a predator, assessing its prey. The elderly woman's jaw tightened with determination. She had survived Stalin's purges, famines, and decades of Siberian winters. One hungry wolf would not be her downfall. Not now, not ever. Yelena returned to her cabin and carefully examined her late husband's hunting rifle, a reliable bolt-action weapon that had served their family for 30 years. Her arthritic fingers moved slowly but surely as she cleaned the barrel and checked the ammunition. 5 bullets remained, enough for what needed to be done if her aim stayed true. The Yakut people had survived in this harsh land for over 1,000 years, developing techniques and wisdom passed down through generations. Yelena's grandmother had taught her to read animal tracks, to predict weather changes by the behavior of birds, and to find food where others saw only frozen wasteland. She prepared her traditional breakfast: frozen fish, sliced thin, fermented mare's milk, and tea brewed from wild herbs she had gathered during the brief summer months. Each bite provided essential calories needed to maintain body heat in the extreme cold. Her metabolism had adapted over decades to efficiently burn fat and protein, keeping her core temperature stable even when the air could freeze exposed skin in seconds. After eating, she studied the wolf tracks more carefully. The prints were large, indicating a mature male, probably weighing 60 to 70 kilograms. The stride pattern suggested the animal was healthy but desperate, likely driven from its pack territory by younger, stronger wolves. Lone wolves were dangerous because they had nothing to lose. Yelena's dark eyes, still sharp despite her age, followed the tracks as they circled her property in a wide arc. The wolf had been testing her defenses, looking for weaknesses. It had approached the reindeer barn 3 times during the night, but hadn't attempted to break in. Yet. The old woman smiled grimly. Her ancestors had faced far worse predators than one hungry wolf. The wolf returned the second night, bolder this time. Yelena woke to the sound of her reindeer snorting and stamping nervously in their shelter. Through her frost-covered window, she glimpsed a grey shadow moving between the sparse birch trees that surrounded her homestead. The creature was magnificent, lean but powerful, with thick winter fur and intelligent yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the moonlight. She dressed quickly in her warmest clothes, wool undergarments, thick felt boots, fur-lined trousers, and her heavy coat made from reindeer hide. Her movements were deliberate and quiet. At her age, every action required careful consideration to avoid injury in the brutal cold. Armed with her rifle and a powerful flashlight, Yelena stepped outside. The snow crunched under her feet with the distinctive sound that only occurred at extreme temperatures, each step creating a sharp crack as the frozen crystals compressed. The air was so cold it burned her lungs despite the wool scarf covering her nose and mouth. The wolf had vanished, but its tracks told a clear story. It had approached within 10 meters of the barn before retreating. Tomorrow night, it would come closer. The pattern was predictable. Predators tested boundaries until they found an opening. Yelena spent the next day preparing. She reinforced the barn door with additional wooden planks and checked every possible entry point. She gathered dry wood for the fire and melted extra water, storing it in containers near the heat source. Most importantly, she cleaned her rifle again and practiced her aim on a target made from birch bark. Her hands were steady despite her age. The Yakut blood in her veins carried the genetic memory of countless hunters who had survived by their skill and determination. As wind howled around her cabin like the voices of ancient spirits, Yelena sat by the fire, remembering her youth. She had been born in 1951, during some of the harshest years in Soviet history. Food was scarce, fuel was rationed, and survival depended on the old ways her grandparents secretly taught, despite government disapproval of traditional practices. Her grandmother Sardana had been a legendary hunter who could track animals across frozen rivers and through blizzards that would blind modern hunters. Sardana taught young Yelena to read the subtle signs that revealed an animal's intentions. How a wolf's ears positioned when it prepared to attack, the way tracks deepened when a creature carried extra weight, the meaning behind different howl patterns. The land provides for those who understand its language, Sardana had whispered during long winter nights, but it shows no mercy to the ignorant or unprepared. Yelena's husband, Mikhail, had been a good man, strong and capable, but he had relied too heavily on modern conveniences. When the generator failed or the radio went silent, he became anxious and uncertain. Yelena, however, felt more confident when stripped down to the basic elements of survival. The simpler the situation, the clearer her mind became. She checked her supplies methodically: dried fish, preserved meat, tea, ammunition, medical kit, and emergency flares. Everything was organized and accessible. If the wolf forced a confrontation, she would be ready. Outside, the temperature continued dropping. The metal tools in her shed contracted with sharp, popping sounds. Ice formed on the inside of her windows, despite the roaring fire. This was weather that could kill the unprepared within minutes, but Yelena felt calm and focused. The wolf would return tonight. She was certain of it. The third night brought an eerie silence that experienced Arctic dwellers recognized as dangerous. No wind stirred the snow-laden branches. No owls called from the forest. Even the usual creaking of wood and ice had stopped. In this absolute quiet, every sound carried for kilometers across the frozen landscape. Yelena positioned herself near the window with the best view of the barn, her rifle loaded and ready. She had turned off all lights except for a small oil lamp that cast dancing shadows on the cabin walls. Her breathing was controlled and steady, each exhalation creating a small cloud of vapor that quickly dissipated in the cold air. At midnight, she saw movement. The wolf emerged from the tree line like a grey ghost, its thick fur making it appear larger than its actual size. It moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator, each step calculated and silent. The animal's intelligence was evident in how it used available cover, staying in shadows and moving when clouds obscured the moon. The wolf approached the barn systematically, testing the air for scents and examining the reinforcements Yelena had added. It seemed to understand that the old woman had strengthened her defenses, and this knowledge made the creature more cautious rather than deterred. For 20 minutes, the wolf circled the property while Yelena tracked its movement through different windows. The animal was learning her routines, studying the layout of her homestead, gathering information for a future attack. This was not a mindless beast driven by simple hunger. This was an intelligent predator developing a hunting strategy. When the wolf finally retreated into the forest, Yelena knew the real confrontation was still coming. Tomorrow night would bring the decisive encounter. She spent the remaining hours until dawn, preparing for what might be her final hunt. Dawn brought no relief from the crushing cold. Yelena's thermometer showed -73 degrees, among the coldest temperatures she had experienced in her 7 decades of Siberian life. At such extremes, exposed skin could freeze solid in less than 2 minutes, and metal became so brittle it could shatter like glass. She began her preparations with the methodical care her ancestors had practiced for generations. First, she checked her reindeer, ensuring they had adequate food and water. Bayan and Kira were nervous, their animal instincts warning them of the predator's presence. She spoke to them in the traditional Yakut language, using the soothing words her grandmother had taught her. Next, she prepared her hunting gear with ritual precision. The rifle was cleaned and oiled, each bullet inspected for defects. She sharpened her hunting knife until it could slice paper, then wrapped the handle with leather strips for better grip in the cold. Her emergency kit included matches sealed in waterproof containers, a small axe, rope, and medical supplies. Most importantly, she prepared herself mentally and spiritually. The Yakut tradition taught that successful hunting required harmony between the hunter's spirit and the natural world. Yelena burned dried herbs and spoke the old prayers her grandmother had whispered in secret during the Soviet years when such practices were forbidden. She ate a substantial meal of high-energy foods, dried fish, fermented dairy products, and nuts preserved from the previous autumn. Her body would need maximum fuel for what was coming. As afternoon faded into the endless winter darkness, she dressed in her warmest clothes and took her position by the window. Tonight, the stalking game would end. Either the wolf would claim her reindeer, or she would claim the wolf. There would be no middle ground in this ancient dance between predator and prey. The wolf arrived earlier than expected, appearing at the edge of the clearing, while traces of twilight still colored the western sky. Yelena immediately recognized the change in its behavior. This was no longer reconnaissance. The animal moved with purposeful determination, heading directly toward the barn where her reindeer waited. She slipped outside through the back door, using the cabin to mask her movement. The cold hit her like a physical blow, but her body was prepared for it. Every piece of clothing had been chosen for maximum warmth and mobility. Her felt boots made no sound on the packed snow as she circled toward a position that would give her a clear shot. The wolf had reached the barn and was testing the reinforced door with its powerful shoulders. The wooden planks groaned under the assault, but held firm. Inside, Bayan and Kira were panicking, their frightened calls echoing across the frozen landscape. The wolf's predatory instincts were fully aroused now. It could smell the fear and desperation of trapped prey. Yelena positioned herself behind a snow-covered woodpile, approximately 30 meters from the barn. At this distance, her rifle would be devastatingly accurate. She controlled her breathing, allowing her heart rate to slow despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Her grandmother's training took over. Become one with the weapon. Feel the target's movement. Wait for the perfect moment. The wolf stepped back from the barn door and began searching for another entry point. As it turned broadside to her position, Yelena had a perfect shot at the animal's vital organs. Her finger found the trigger, and she began the slow, steady pressure that would end this confrontation. But something made her hesitate. In the wolf's yellow eyes, she saw not just hunger, but a desperate intelligence that reminded her of her own struggle for survival. Through her rifle scope, Yelena studied the wolf with the trained eye of someone who had observed Arctic wildlife for 7 decades. What she saw changed her understanding of the situation entirely. This was not a healthy predator seeking easy prey. This was a starving animal making a desperate last stand against death. The wolf's ribs were visible beneath its thick fur, and its movements, while still graceful, carried the slight tremor of weakness that came from prolonged hunger. Its left rear leg favored slightly, suggesting an old injury that had never properly healed. Most telling of all, its coat showed the patchy areas and dull color that indicated malnutrition. Yelena lowered her rifle slightly, her mind racing through possibilities. A healthy wolf would never risk attacking a defended position like her barn. This animal was beyond normal predatory behavior. It was facing starvation in an environment where prey had become increasingly scarce due to climate changes and human encroachment. The wolf continued its examination of the barn, but its movements were becoming more erratic. It would attack soon, driven by desperation rather than hunting instinct. When that happened, Yelena would have no choice but to kill it. But first, she wanted to try something her grandmother had taught her about the old ways of coexistence. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a piece of dried fish, part of her emergency rations. Moving slowly to avoid startling the wolf, she tossed the food halfway between her position and the barn. The wolf immediately detected the scent and turned toward the offering, its yellow eyes fixed on this unexpected development. For a moment, predator and human regarded each other across the frozen landscape. Two survivors, each fighting to live another day in the world's most unforgiving environment. The wolf approached the fish cautiously, never taking its eyes off Yelena's position. The wolf devoured the dried fish in seconds, but the small offering only intensified its hunger. It looked toward Yelena's position with new understanding. This human had food, and food meant survival. The animal's desperation was now mixed with calculation as it weighed the risks of approaching closer against the possibility of finding more sustenance. Yelena made a decision that would have seemed insane to most people, but felt perfectly natural to someone raised in the old Yakut traditions. She stood up slowly, making herself visible to the wolf while keeping her rifle ready. The animal tensed, prepared to flee or fight, but something in the old woman's calm demeanor kept it from bolting. "I see you, brother wolf," she said in the ancient Yakut language, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. "I know your hunger, because I have felt it too. But these reindeer are my life, just as you seek life for yourself." She reached into her pack and pulled out more dried fish, along with some preserved meat she had been saving for emergencies. Piece by piece, she tossed the food toward the wolf, each offering landing a little closer to her position. The wolf ate eagerly, its desperate hunger overriding its natural caution around humans. As the animal fed, Yelena studied its condition more carefully. The wolf was old, probably 8 or 9 years, ancient for a wild predator. Its muzzle showed grey fur, and its movements carried the stiffness of aged joints. This was likely a former pack leader, driven out by younger wolves and forced to survive alone in the harshest environment on Earth. The feeding continued for several minutes until Yelena had given the wolf nearly a day's worth of her emergency rations. The animal's demeanor had changed completely. The desperate aggression was replaced by wary gratitude. It sat in the snow, watching her with intelligent eyes that seemed to acknowledge the gift she had offered. Over the following days, an extraordinary relationship developed between the elderly woman and the aging wolf. Each evening, as darkness fell across the Siberian landscape, the wolf would appear at the edge of Yelena's property. She would emerge from her cabin with food, never enough to make the animal dependent, but sufficient to ease its desperate hunger. The wolf, which she began calling Siri, Grey One, maintained a respectful distance, but no longer showed aggression toward her reindeer. It seemed to understand that Yelena's generosity came with conditions. In return for food, the wolf would not threaten her livestock. This was an ancient pact, the kind her ancestors had sometimes made with the spirits of the wild. More surprisingly, Seri began providing an unexpected service. His presence deterred other predators from approaching Yelena's homestead. Foxes that might have raided her food stores stayed away, and even the occasional brown bear gave the area a wide berth when they detected the wolf's scent markers around the property. Yelena found herself looking forward to these evening encounters. Living alone for 3 years had been harder than she admitted, even to herself. The wolf's presence provided a connection to the wild world that had shaped her people for centuries. When she spoke to Seri in the old language, she felt her grandmother's spirit nearby, approving of this return to traditional ways. The arrangement also served practical purposes. The wolf's keen senses often detected approaching weather changes before Yelena's instruments registered them. When Seri became restless and sought shelter early, she knew to prepare for severe storms. When he ranged farther from the property, she understood that conditions would remain stable. As the weeks passed, both human and wolf grew stronger. Yelena's food sharing forced her to be more efficient with her resources, while Seri's improved nutrition restored some of his former strength and alertness. The harshest part of winter arrived with a vengeance that tested even Yelena's legendary endurance. For 5 consecutive days, temperatures plummeted to -78 degrees Celsius, accompanied by winds that drove the wind chill to levels that could kill exposed humans in less than a minute. The storm was so severe that even stepping outside became life-threatening. Yelena's cabin became her fortress against the elements. She burned wood constantly, but ice still formed on the interior walls. Her water supplies froze despite being kept near the fire, forcing her to melt snow for drinking water. The reindeer huddled in their shelter, their thick coats providing just enough protection to keep them alive. On the 3rd day of the storm, she realized Seri had not appeared for his evening feeding. Through the howling wind and driving snow, she could see nothing beyond her immediate surroundings. The wolf could be anywhere, sheltering in the forest or lying frozen somewhere in the white wasteland that surrounded her property. The thought of losing her unlikely companion filled Yelena with unexpected grief. Over the weeks of their arrangement, Seri had become more than just a wild animal she fed. He represented the connection between her modern survival and the ancient ways of her people. His presence reminded her that humans and nature could coexist through mutual respect and understanding. On the 4th day, as the storm began to weaken, she heard a familiar sound, the low whine that Seri used to announce his presence. Through her frost-covered window, she saw a snow-covered mound near her woodpile. The wolf had survived by digging a shelter in the deep snow, using his thick fur and natural instincts to wait out the deadly weather. When she brought him food that evening, Seri's grateful eyes seemed to acknowledge that they had both survived something that could have killed them. Their bond had been tested by the worst winter could offer, and it had held firm. As February gave way to March, subtle signs appeared that winter's grip was finally beginning to weaken. The days grew incrementally longer, and temperatures occasionally rose above -60 degrees. Snow began to settle differently, and the quality of light changed in ways that only long-time Arctic residents could detect. Yelena's relationship with Seri had evolved into something unprecedented in her experience. The wolf now approached within 10 meters of her cabin, close enough that she could see the intelligence in his yellow eyes and the grey markings that distinguished him from other wolves. He had regained much of his strength, and his coat had improved dramatically with regular feeding. More importantly, Seri had begun bringing gifts, small prey animals he had caught during his hunting expeditions. A ptarmigan here, an Arctic hare there, always left at the edge of her property where she would find them during her morning rounds. This behavior indicated that the wolf now considered her part of his pack, worthy of sharing resources. The arrangement had saved both their lives. Yelena's food sharing had prevented Seri from starving, while his presence had protected her property from other predators and provided early warning of dangerous weather changes. Together, they had survived one of the harshest winters in recent memory. As spring approached, Yelena knew their partnership would change. Seri would eventually return to the wild, perhaps finding a mate or joining another pack. But the lessons of their winter together would remain with both of them. She had rediscovered the ancient wisdom of her ancestors, that survival in the Arctic required cooperation with nature, not domination over it. Standing in her doorway on a relatively warm morning of -40 degrees, watching Seri disappear into the forest after their final feeding, Yelena smiled. At 72, she had learned that even in the world's most isolated places, no one truly survives alone. The old ways, the wisdom of her grandmother, and the spirit of the Yakut people lived on through connections that transcended the boundaries between human and wild. The Arctic silence was no longer empty. It was filled with the promise of another spring, another year of survival, and the enduring strength that came from understanding one's place in the ancient dance of life and death that defined existence in the world's last wilderness.